Howdy, y'all. I'm Adam the Renaissance Nerd, and I welcome you once again to my Star Wars Expanded Universe Book Club, where we are covering the glorious story of real Star Wars from the beginning to the unfortunate end. This week, we continue with the Jedi Academy Trilogy by Kevin J. Anderson, Book 2, Dark Apprentice. And as always, I apologize for the Legends tag. I was basically lied to when I bought this. They told me wouldn't have it on it, but hey, my book 3 doesn't. It's my original book 3. Anyway, Dark Apprentice, the second book in the trilogy. It's basically a middle book in the trilogy. Things happen, but none of them are massively monumental. It's really all set up for what happens in book 3. There are a couple very important moments by the end of the book, but it's really a lot of setup for the events of book 3. Let's just get into it. I'm going to go over what happens in the book, and then we're going to talk about the characters, as I always do, how I feel about them, how I feel they were expressed, how I feel they're growing, or in some cases, maybe they weren't done very well in this book. And then I got a few nitpicks for Kevin J. Anderson and Dark Apprentice and the Jedi Academy trilogy as a whole, but we'll get to that at the end. So, story begins. Luke is on Yavin 4. He has begun his Jedi Academy, or as he refers to it as Jedi Praxium, where his students are learning from each other and him. And he's got more than just two at this one. He's got several. But we've really focused on, I would say, 4 or 5. I mean, that are actually really important, and some that really carry on to the future of the EU. But we really only focus on the importantly out of his eventual students, Gantoris, Silgal, she doesn't come until the end, and of course, Kip Duran. But Luke is happy. He likes the way things are going. But of course, Luke continues to be unsure of himself. He's not sure. Can he do this? Will he be able to keep his students from going to the dark side? And that is a very real fear because it's something that he deals with right away. And it's just good Star Wars storytelling that even after all this time, we are now 7 years since the Battle of Endor, and Luke is still learning. He is a Jedi Master now, and this is the first time. He is now a Jedi Master. And he's still learning. He's not perfect, and he's going to show that he's not perfect in this book. Meanwhile, though, the events of the story really kick off with a tragedy. Leia and Admiral Akbar are on a basically diplomatic mission to the planet Vors, who have been shutting themselves off. It's like they're like a bird-like race from the Empire. Now the Empire's done, they're ready to not necessarily join the New Republic, but they're ready to work with the New Republic and let people visit their Cathedral of Winds, which is their prized architectural magnificent achievement, where it's a planet with storms, so the wind goes through, it's musical, that kind of shit. What happens is, though, upon entry to the planet in Admiral Akbar's private B-wing, something goes wrong. And Akbar cannot pull up from a disastrous entry, which we learn later is sabotage. He believes it's an accident. He believes it's pilot error, but it's actually sabotage by one of his most trusted aides who was taken years ago by the Imperials and had literally his brains scooped out and replaced with, I guess you call it, synthetic organic material that allows the Imperials to control him, despite his desperate effort not to want to betray his leader, Akbar. What happens, though, is Leia gets ejected from the B-wing, but Akbar crashes right into the Cathedral of Winds, causing a massive disaster. Hundreds die. Akbar is shamed. He soon returns to Coruscant, where he hands in his resignation. When it appears, it is his fault, when in fact it's sabotage. The problem is, though, this is leaving the New Republic Council, the council that's governing things, all the ministers, Mon Mothma's cabinet, it's leaving it pretty one-sided with the more aggressive tendencies of some of the former military leaders who are being placed in control or placed in high cabinet positions in order to allow some stability. And that's one of my small criticisms of this series, right? Is that Kevin J. Anderson doesn't really create anybody new in this sense. He just reuses old familiar war leaders from the rebellion and puts them in there. And yeah, I'm sorry, it really that didn't add anything to the New Republic government right there. Whereas opposed to the Timothy Zahn, his trilogy, we had all kinds of new names that were introduced as part of the growing New Republic upper echelons of the government. Anyway, Leia then part of Leia's arc in this is she tries to convince Akbar to come back. Well, we'll get to that later. It comes a little bit later, but that's Leia's arc. Leia's kind of absent for the first third of the story. She comes into play in the middle and the back half in that mission. Meanwhile, she and Han are being new parents essentially because the 2-year-old twins, Jason and Jaina, have returned to Coruscant, and they are they're not problem children, but you're dealing with a couple of force sensitive children who know they have force powers, can already use them, and like to basically bend the rules to get what they want. And they're having a hard time. They're doing their best, but they're having a hard time because the twins are not always responsive. Everybody's still getting used to each other. It's an interesting dynamic, and I appreciate it. But the literal arc the twins get in the book is kind of unnecessary. I mean, it's good that this is the beginning of the introduction of putting the solo children and other new characters to the forefront, giving them time. But I feel like on this read, it felt a little silly and unnecessary to me. It just really did. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Meanwhile, back on Yavin 4, which is where, as I said, Luke's Praxium is, his students are they're learning. But Gantoris, the stoic man from the I forget the name of the planet right now. Anyway, the dying planet, he's being tempted by the dark side. Already a shadowy figure is stalking his dreams and stalking him and whispering in his mind and pushing him. And he's starting to think that being a Jedi is more of an aggressive thing, not the becoming one with the Force and learning and experiencing and listening. No, he's leaning towards aggressive tendencies, while the other students are simply happy to have been exposed to the Force, that their minds are awakening, their perception of reality is changing, and they're happy that Master Skywalker is showing them bit by bit. They're not rushing. They're perfectly happy to take the baby steps. But Gantoris, due to the whisperings in his ear, wants to go faster. And at one point, the whispering voice teaches him how to build a lightsaber long before he's ready to do so. And he builds his own lightsaber, which a short time later results in him literally challenging Luke to a duel to say, I am a Jedi. I'm ready to learn more. And Luke plays him a little bit and he gives him a good workout, but eventually Luke ends the fight. He uses it as a teaching experience not only for himself, but for Gantoris and the other students. And Luke shows great progress as a teacher. He understands that he needs to not push everybody's boundaries too hard, but he finds that fine line between firmness and understanding, which is what a good Jedi Master does. You give him a little bit of give him a little bit of rope, let him learn, but then you pull it up short and say, okay, you still got a ways to go. But Luke, as I said, still understands he has a long way to go. Meanwhile, then, while all this stuff's going on Yavin 4, Han is trying to be a good dad, but at the same time, he's also trying to be a good dad in dealing with Kip. Because remember, Kip, who he rescued from the spice mines of Kessel, and who then rescued him from Admiral Dalla's clutches. Kip's wanted to live a life, and Han's trying to show him what life has been like. Kip's an 18-year-old kid who's been in a mine for 10 years living in the dark. Han wants to show him a good time. They have a little scene where they go turbo skiing, they call it. It's an okay scene, but it's more about Han really dealing with the fact that, I mean, how do I put this? The Han Kip relationship in this book and forward for a little while is Han learning what it's gonna be like to be a dad. I mean, his children love him, but there's still a certain level of figuring it out. But with Kip, at least he's talking to an adult, semi-adult. He's 18, 17, 18. But he's learning and he's understanding, and he feels a strong bond with Kip. And it's a good dad thing. And that's what we see, that Han is overall a good dad, and he's trying to extend his family to this young man who is going to end up going to Luke's academy, but he wants to make sure that he's happy and he's ready to do it. He does it on his own terms. So that's the extent of the good part of Han in this book, because there is actually, Kevin J. Anderson does do a little disservice to Han and to Lando too in this book. But eventually, Kip is ready to leave. Problem is that Kip's already started going a little bit dark side. Previous book, he learned that through anger he can get boosts of power. Problem is he hasn't said that to anybody. He already is leaning towards the dark side, and he also, it's fed by his fears. I mean, that the whole thing, the road to hell is paved in good intentions. Kip wants power so that he can never have anything taken away from him again, and he sees the Empire as the entity that takes everything from his life, takes everything from everybody's lives, and ruins everybody's lives. So Kip wants power to keep himself safe and to stop the Empire, and that's going to lead him down a path. So as he's getting ready to go, though, suddenly the reports come in that Leia has been in the accident on Vors. Problem is, Han can't go right away to get her in the Falcon because, and now here's something that, in my opinion, was very dumb in this arc, and it really served nothing because it was this back and forth little stupid thing between Han and Lando of playing sabacc over the Falcon. They do it 3 or 4 times in the book. And throughout the book, the Falcon changes ownership like 3 times. It's like Kevin J. Anderson didn't know what really to give Han to do for most of the book until the very end. And it's kind of annoying because up until now, even in the first book in Jedi Search, it was such a good Han story, and Han had so much to do. But now suddenly in the middle book, it's as if Anderson was trying to figure out what to do with Han. Now that Han had an adventure in the first book, we couldn't give Han a complete back seat, but they gave him like this middling story where Han's kind of just fumbling around, frustrated that he can't go to Leia because he lost the Falcon in a gambling bet with Lando. But then him and Lando keep playing over and over again for ownership. By the end of the book, Lando just gives him the Falcon back in an attempt to impress Mara Jade, which of course everybody knows where this is going, was worthless because Mara doesn't want anything to do with Lando. But you see, it was kind of a useless little thing. It's one of the things that really annoyed me about the book. The whole betting of the Falcon, playing sabacc over and over again. It just didn't. It fell flat with me. I didn't enjoy it. I felt it was pointless. The Falcon is Han's. He shouldn't have been betting it. He was venting his frustrations about not being able to get to Leia, and then he couldn't get to Leia. Then he couldn't take Kip to. Then he couldn't take Kip to Yavin. Then he couldn't take a trip to Yavin because he couldn't go there. So Mara was going to take a message to Luke when Mara shows up in the middle of the book for a little bit. It's like they didn't know what to do with Han in this book. Meanwhile, then Leia comes back, and as I said, Admiral Akbar has resigned, and Leia now suddenly, we get a little bit more of her life is a little bit chaotic, where the New Republic is more issues of the New Republic being thrust on her because Mon Mothma is suddenly disappearing from public side of the public. She's pulling back for some reason. Now, Leia thinks it's because Mon Mothma is getting lazy. She doesn't care. And what happens, though, is eventually Leia discovers that Mon Mothma is dying. She's very ill. I'm not going to particularly reveal this yet because I mentioned something in the first book. You can go back, watch the first video, and if you put pieces together, if you haven't read this yet, you'll know the source, but it doesn't come around until book 3. Either way, Mon Mothma's sick, and Leia, upon learning this, believes that Akbar must return. He must return because they need his steadying voice and his steadying hand to keep everything from going too far to one side of aggression, with the more aggressive tendencies of the other military leaders who have been put in the cabinet positions. So Leia sets off on a diplomatic mission to Mon Calamari to get Akbar back in the service. Meanwhile, Akbar took a quick visit to the hidden world where Winter is keeping Anakin Solo, and that was just basically done to give us a look at that world, because meanwhile, those who were sabotaging Akbar through his lieutenant, have been able to use that lieutenant to get information where the hidden world of Anoth is. So we learn that the Imperial ambassador on Karita, the Imperial Academy, is planning an assault on the hidden planet of Anoth to basically kidnap Anakin and turn him into another emperor. That's his goal. That's it. Meanwhile, so finally, Kip arrives at the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4. But before that, there was a tragedy. Gantoris, after his duel with Luke, is meditating and trying to come to grips with things, but then the shadowy dark man arrives, and we learn that there is a dark presence on Yavin 4. And basically, Gantoris tries to fight it, and he loses, and he's basically burned to a crisp. And the rest of the students are all shocked, but Luke keeps him calm. And Luke is devastated. He's lost a student. He doesn't know why. There's something tickling in the back of his mind. He hasn't figured it out yet. Then Kip arrives. And when Kip arrives, Kip is the most powerful student there. He's got the most potential that Luke has seen. And he's brilliant in all his training. And he accelerates quickly, but so quickly that he becomes frustrated. He feels like he could do more. And that's where this dark spirit comes into play. He whispers in Kip's mind, and Kip is very willing to listen. And that is when we learn that finally, this dark spirit is the Force Ghost, or not so much Force Ghost, the disembodied spirit, because he didn't so much die, but he ripped his spirit away from his body. It is the spirit of the Sith Lord, Exar Kun, from the Jedi Civil War that happened before the events of Knights of the Old Republic. We learned that Exar Kun survived. He tore when the Jedi are about to defeat him. He sacrificed the entire Masasai people who built the pyramids for him as Force focal points. Sacrificed all of them to tear his spirit away for safekeeping, to hide on the planet until a day where he could train a new student and maybe get a new body out of it too. Exar Kun begins to teach Kip Sith abilities. Now, there's a little bit of a problem here. Exar Kun, between him, some of his dialogue, it's again, we run into the problem with the fact that these books were written before George did the prequel trilogy. And at one point, Exar Kun tries to convert Luke in a dream by pretending to be the Force Ghost of Anakin. And there's a little bit of description of how Anakin found Sith teachings and tried to learn them, and Obi-Wan didn't like it, and this and that. We kind of gotta ignore it. All you gotta do is ignore it. Maybe you gotta work with Exar Kun. If you can retcon in your brain, Exar Kun didn't have the full knowledge of it. He didn't understand how it really worked, what really happened. Maybe Palpatine was blocking his vision of what was going on. Basically, you gotta fudge it. You gotta fudge it that this version told of how Anakin fell to the dark side, a little But we've already established that sometimes we have to do a little headcanon retconning to make things line up with when George started to do the prequel trilogy and then the Clone Wars. Got to do that. So, that's there. Either way, though, but what Exar Kun does is he does start to teach Kip Sith abilities, Sith techniques, and Kip loves it because he's feeding on his hate and anger to grow stronger. Because he hates the Empire, he needs to destroy them. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry, when Kip was arriving on Yavin 4, Wedge was leading the group, was leading the travel mission there, the escort mission, and they disposed of the Sun Crusher. Remember, the Sun Crusher from the first book was the final super weapon developed by Dr. Qui Zux to basically be the ultimate super weapon by basically destroying a star and turning it into supernova to wipe out entire systems. They plunged the Sun Crusher into Yavin 4's core, Yavin's core, the gas giant itself, thinking no one could get their hands on it. And Kip was the one who programmed to go in there because his knowledge of it was essential to make it work there because he got it while no one else could. That brings me to a little thing. Meanwhile, there is a kind of a side mission there. So Kip's fallen to the dark side, and Exar Kun is pushing and pushing, and Kip's growing frustrated with Luke. He thinks Luke is a loser at this point. Meanwhile, there is a side mission that will come back at the end. Wedge gets a little bit of a fun little side story. He becomes the basically companion guarding of Dr. Zooks. We'll call her Qui, who's being protected from possible Imperial agents because they want her knowledge. She has all the knowledge of the Death Star and the Sun Crusher in her brilliant mind, and she doesn't want it used for everybody for any malignant purposes anymore. So until they can make sure she can be completely safe, Wedge basically takes her off the grid to Ithor, where they go on vacation. So they're going to be on Ithor for a while until the end of the book. We'll come back to that. And they start to fall in love. Qui starts to fall in love, and it's nice that Wedge gets a little bit of some action here. And Qui is starting to live life outside her science, and she sees there's more to life than just her science. Anywho, meanwhile, Leia goes to... Oh, I forgot an important part. I'm sorry. Admiral Dalla. I should have come to this earlier. Excuse me. Admiral Dalla in this, she has two pivotal moments in this. One, her frustration with the inability to basically successfully attack anything at this point. She's hiding out in some place called the Cauldron Nebula, where it's basically a collection of stars creating a nebula. What happens though is she first starts out with her mission to cause chaos for the New Republic. And what she does is she learns of Gantoris's people who are relocated to Dantooine, and after doing some preparation, she launches an attack and wipes out the entire settlement. That leads to part of Gantoris's fall to Exar Kun, because Exar Kun uses that to try and convert Gantoris, and he pulls back, and then he dies. Film that in. So Adala is trying to cause as much damage as possible, but frustrated with her inability to really do anything powerful, she decides to attack Mon Calamari. Now, in the book, they call it Calamari. I've always heard it called Mon Calamari, Mon Cals, so I'm going to say Mon Calamari. She decides to do a full-on attack using Tarkin's strategies to destroy Mon Cal, because it's a shipyards. She wants to cripple the Republic's ship capabilities, ship construction capabilities. And that brings us to Leia. Leia has arrived at Mon Cal. She's looking for Akbar. She meets the ambassador of Mon Cal, a female Mon Calamari, Silgal, who turns out to be force sensitive, has heightened precognition, and understands healing a little bit. Like where the hurts are, where the pain is, and who's going to live, who's going to die. Very interesting stuff. Really comes into play in book 3. Now, while they search out Akbar, Leia does her best to try and convince the Admiral to come back, but he's staunch that he shouldn't be there anymore, that he's no good. He's lost his mojo. Well, things change when they accidentally discover an Imperial probe that triggers, which is what brings Dalla to Mon Cal. That's why Dalla comes to Mon Cal, because an old Imperial probe sends out a burst transmission that she picks up. That's why she's going there. Dalla attacks while Leia is still there, and it's she plans the whole thing with her 3 remaining Star Destroyers. Thing is, though, she doesn't know that Admiral Akbar is there, and per the actual lore, Admiral Akbar was, when he was enslaved by the Imperials, he was forced to be Grand Moff Tarkin's personal servant, and he learned from listening and watching Tarkin. His own brilliant mind was able to absorb Tarkin's military genius. So he absorbed all of Tarkin's strategies. So as the Mon Calamari are defending against Dalla's attack, he recognizes the Tarkin strategy she's using, and he sacrifices the cruiser they were building, the capital ship they were building in the shipyards, in it's not a suicide run because nobody was on board, but he rams the ship into one of Dalla's Star Destroyers, completely ruining her attack, and Dalla's forced to retreat in shame. She returns to the Cauldron Nebula, where she is then plotting her next move. And that's all that Dalla really does in this. But you get a really good look at Dalla in this as she's struggling for for her place in all this, because she wants revenge for the loss of the Empire. She wants revenge for the loss of Tarkin, but she also wants to keep trying to prove herself. And this is a strong female character who is very brilliant in her own right, but you realize she doesn't have the practical experience in full on warfare, and it's showing because she's too rigid in her tactics, too rigid in her beliefs, and she's not flexible enough. So someone like Akbar reverses her own strategy against her, and now she's down to 2 Star Destroyers out of the 4. Meanwhile, meanwhile, Dala, while Dala's licking her wounds, we are now coming to the crux of everything. As I said, Han and Lando have been doing the stupid exchange of the Falcon thing, and while they're going to pick up Leia, Han loses it again, and it's like I said, it's stupid. So they get Leia. Meanwhile, while Han and Lando go to pick up Leia, here's now where it's a little silly. Chewie and 3PO were left in charge of the twins on Coruscant. And you get this little thing where 3PO and Chewie took the twins on a field trip to a holographic zoo. And the twins decided they were bored and left. And they end up getting lost in the sublevels of Coruscant. And it's kind of paralleling a children's story, the Little Lost Bantha that were read earlier in the book. And it's just this kind of little silly thing. And all you can really get away from it is that Jason and Jaina are unique. They're able to control their fear even at 2 years old. They're able to push forward. They rely on each other, and it's the important building blocks of their twin relationship and where they're going to grow as characters. So that's kind of all it is. It's a little silly thing. And frankly, it went on a little too long for my taste. Could have done without it. Overall, could have been shorter. And of course, it's some goofy 3PO and Chewie interplay where 3PO's afraid Chewie's going to break it, or Chewie's going to do this, and eventually the twins find help, and they get brought back. And just as Chewie and 3PO are about to admit to Han and Leia they lost the kids, well, Han and Leia had just returned, and the people living in the sublevels who had found the kids returned to Han and Leia. So it all gets resolved with really nothing happening like that. Meanwhile, now here's the crux of the story. Back on Yavin 4, Luke is doing his best to keep everybody's morale up after Gantoris, and he senses that Kip is starting to lose Kip. Kip has been listening more and more to Exar Kun, though Luke doesn't know this. And at one point, Kip has a blow up and says, "I'm done with all of you. You're all losers, basically. I'm out of here." And in the middle of the night, after Mara has come there for a little bit of training herself, he steals Mara's ship and goes off. And while he goes off, his first stop is where did he go? Jeez. He went to Endor. He goes to Endor. Yeah, he goes to Endor to basically the funeral pyre of Vader, searching for knowledge. They're searching for inspiration on the Sith, and he gets in his head that Vader just did it wrong with his leanings toward the Sith and use of the dark side. He was manipulated. He couldn't control it. He was too evil and this and that, and Kip's going to do it better. Kip's going to use the power of the Sith correctly. He's going to be the powerful Jedi protector of the galaxy and get rid of the Empire. He's going to do it. Well, after deciding that he's going to be the great Sith Lord that the galaxy needs, Kip then goes to Ithor. He susses out that Qui is hiding on Ithor with Wedge, and he does, well, this is where the idea of the mind wipe, the Sith getting into your head and pulling stuff out was taken from. Remember, the EU did everything first, folks. He finds Qui, and using Sith techniques, he goes into her mind and literally destroys, no matter, he destroys her mind to an extent. He rips out all her history, her knowledge, her scientific ability, even her past, leaving her a shell of herself where she can't really quite put thoughts together. And it's heartbreaking because the next morning, Wedge comes in. They had a really great night. They shared a kiss, and he's all excited. Oh, and she's a cowering, frightened child in a corner who can barely remember her own name, can barely remember his name, but has no memory at all of her scientific ability. So there you go. Kip took all that knowledge because that knowledge could not exist in him from his opinion. Once that is done, Kip returns to Yavin 4, and we are now at the crux of the story, the climactic moment where he decides he needs an ultimate weapon. He needs the Sun Crusher. But he sent the Sun Crusher into Yavin 4, the center of the gas giant. Well, he has the knowledge of Exar Kun. He has Exar Kun in his back, and together with Exar Kun's direction, using the Masasai temples, which are again a force focusing tool, he reaches out, is able to connect to the Sun Crusher, programs it to come out, guides it back down. Meanwhile, Luke wakes up in the morning, sees what's going on, and tries to stop Kip. But unfortunately, Luke can't do it because alone he could have taken Kip. He does the Jedi thing, tries to turn him back, does the appropriate Jedi Master thing to try and turn somebody away from the dark side. I don't want to fight you. Don't make me do this. Oh, Master Skywalker, you are a fool. I know more than you. My real master, my mentor, has given me the strength and the power. Luke's like, what are you talking about? Oh, Exar Kun appears, and Luke is forced to fight them both. Problem is, Luke's training hasn't extended that far. He hasn't figured out a lot of ways to deal with that kind of onslaught. And they're able to short out his lightsaber. He doesn't have enough force mastery to take on two powerful individuals at once. He could have probably taken Kip on his own, but with Exar Kun there, Luke loses. They overwhelm him, and he appears dead. And what happens is Kip takes the Sun Crusher, and, well, he heads to the Cauldron Nebula where Dala is. And meanwhile, Dala has been planning her what is basically a suicide mission for one of her Star Destroyers. She's planning on crashing it into Coruscant to destroy the central part of the government of the New Republic. But before she can get it going, Kip arrives. He triggers one of the stars of the Cauldron Nebula to go nova, and he seemingly wipes out Dala's remaining fleet while he himself survives because the Sun Crusher is created to survive its own destruction. And now he has set a course to destroy the rest of the Imperial-controlled systems in the galaxy and bring order and peace. Meanwhile, back on Yavin 4, the newly arrived Silgal, who Leia has sent there, after her discovering she's force sensitive, wakes up in the morning. She's been there for a while. She is now comfortable with her training. She can't believe what the world is like with her force eyes opened. And she wakes up in the morning. People are a little nervous. Where's Master Skywalker? Where's Luke? Well, one of the other apprentices, Tion, comes out and says, "Come quickly, Master Skywalker's out front. He's not moving." And Silgal, with her growing healing abilities, is able to sense that Luke is alive, but his spirit is gone. He's empty inside. He's dead in the Force. An end of book. Boom. We are now, like I said, we set up for the events of the third book. Where are we then? Luke's out for the count. You're going to learn right away in the beginning of the next book, his Force spirit has been separated from his body. His body's alive, but his spirit is now on the same plane of existence as Exar Kun. Han is devastated that Kip has turned to the dark side, and he's just trying to find solace in his family. Leia is struggling with keeping the New Republic afloat, with Mon Mothma dying and Akbar not coming back to help her solidify the government, make sure it doesn't go overboard. Meanwhile, Dala, she does survive. She's ready for more vengeance. She's going to go nuts. And the Imperial ambassador in Karita is attempting to kidnap Anakin Solo from Anoth. Shit's not good. Shit isn't good. So, there you are, getting ready for the third book. Now, again, how do I feel about the characters? Luke was great in this. Luke was fantastic because, again, we get still growing and learning Luke. You can sense his struggle. He wants to be a good master, but he's losing students and it's hurting him, but he's not giving in to despair. He's finding center and calm in the Force as he was trained to do. He behaves like a Jedi Master should. Leia only really gets something to do with the back end, and she's just kind of there along for the ride. Leia doesn't really do much. She doesn't really have much growth in this. She's kind of along for the ride of the events. As I said earlier, I feel like Han, and therefore I include Lando in this, Han and Lando get a disservice in this book. Their arc is silly. It's kind of stupid. the whole trading of the Falcon through the Sabak games. Again, it's like Kevin J. Anderson didn't know what to do with Han Solo and Lando. So they're kind of boring. And it's annoying. And frankly, it's really annoying. As I said, the twins, they had their little arc. It was nice. And it's just the beginning of getting the new characters more involved. The most interesting character, aside from Luke in this, is, of course, Kip. Kip's fall to the dark side. Once again, we have a powerful Force sensitive who has taken the wrong path. And this is the beginning of Kip's journey as part of the EU. Now, Kip is going to be present going forward. Not as present as I would have liked, but he is present. And Kip is a great character to follow because of his experiences as one who's going to fall to the dark side. So Kip's internal turmoil of he wants to do good, but he's going to use great evil to do good. And, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's kind of what the representation of Exar Kun's teaching and his dark side power infusing into Kip is. Kip, the Empire is bad, but you can't use one bad to wipe out another bad. And Kip is about to do some horrific things in the coming books. He really he has a fall. And that's part of Star Wars. And that's why it still feels like Star Wars. Even though I have some minor gripes with how Anderson is doing some things, that's a tenet of Star Wars. Star Wars, a fall and a redemption, a true fall. We are invested in Kip. We've had him for 2 books. We were there on Kessel, where he comes up from the mines. We know his backstory, how he suffered at the hands of the Imperials, where his anger comes from. We know his motivations, unlike a certain Inquisitor in a show right now. We know his motivations. We understand him. We know why he went to the dark side. We know why he's ready and willing to abandon Luke's teachings, because he's got a skewed vision of things. He's in a rush. The quicker, easier path to power is the dark side. He doesn't want to take the time to learn, to understand, to feel the Force. And he's going to do horrific things because of that. But it's Star Wars. When we understand how this stuff works, there's always redemption around the road for a dark side user who was once, or at least on the path to being a light side. So Kip is a fascinating character where he has just internalized all his anger, and he had already started down the path to the dark side, and his eagerness, his anxious need to be strong overrides what Luke is trying to teach him about patience, about understanding, about working together with everybody to accomplish things. And it's the tenets of the Jedi clashing with the tenets of the Sith. Jedi, calm, collected, work together, look out, compassion. If you think for a moment, you'll come up with another solution. Sith, their passions give them strength. Just reach out there and grab it. To hell with everything else. As long as it does you good, then that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what happens to anybody else. Your purpose is all that matters. Singular focus to a group focus. And so it's a great, we get these early representations of what it's like to clash between the Jedi teachings and Sith teachings. Because the Jedi Academy trilogy was where the Sith and the Jedi really started to be used more. Up until this point, Lucas hadn't used the term Sith a lot, outside of Darth Vader as a Dark Lord of the Sith. Either way, it's compelling. We feel for Kip, and we're going, no, Kip, don't do it. Don't do it. You're better than this. Luke is trying to teach you the right way. Don't listen to Exar Kun. And he's not listening to us. He's not listening to Luke. So we're invested, and there's going to be payoff. Because as we go in now into the 3rd book, Champions of the Force. I remember enjoying this one, Champions of the Force. A lot of great stuff is going to happen here, and it goes in a way you don't expect. That's why, in my opinion, it's the best book of the trilogy, because it takes the confrontations and the conflicts and it goes in a way you don't think it's going to go. And you really get great character development from new characters. So I look forward to sharing this with you when I finish reading it. Until then, may the Force be with you. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will see you next time with Champions of the Force. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me at therennerd@gmail.com. That email's for channel business only, so I check it on a daily basis. Also, you can find me at the Geeks and Gamers forums under @ROAS, and you can find me at Rumble and Odyssey, The Renaissance Nerd. Thank you again. See you next time.